and ProtonDB, which serves as both a troubleshooting resource and a reference for which games work so you won't have to waste your money on a bad experience.
See, and it's that community sharing that I think sometimes these developers overlook. Is there are Steam guides and things like that to help you, but these like places where you sometimes have to swim through to find those guides that will like help you get your game working. But these resources like ProtonDB and Lootress bring all that stuff into one place so that you can just find your game and like sift through the solutions maybe, and you might find that solution that works for you.
With all of that said, in spite of all of that work, we're honestly just not there yet. And we're mere months from the launch.
Yeah, it's not perfect still. So
Of the Steam Deck, when 100% compatibility is supposedly coming.
Again, I thought maybe this is an issue with my proprietary NVIDIA driver. Maybe it's out of date, but Manjaro begged to differ. Apparently, I am up to date.
So this is an issue, like NVIDIA doesn't support Linux all that well. That's just a fact. And that's why many people that are gaming on Linux go with AMD, because AMD is better supported. And AMD is kind of where Vulkan started, which a lot of the Proton tech relies on is Vulkan. And why Valve has pushed for Vulkan to be implemented across the board and developers to use Vulkan as a backend, because Vulkan will basically allow it to run a lot faster and smoother because you're using Vulkan calls instead of DirectX translating into Vulkan, which then you go through that whole rigmarole. So Vulkan calls through a compatibility layer for Windows, but those Vulkan calls are native, so they don't have to be translated into Linux syscalls.
So your mileage may vary. Another problem that's been a thorn in the side of the Linux community for years is anti-cheat. Now, the game launches and seems to run totally fine.
Okay, so if you want a guide on how to get this running just fine with anti-cheat, Mudahar has the perfect one for you. I think we'll see if he's overlooked Muda's guide on doing that, but that requires you to recompile your kernel and configuring it to do certain things for virtualization to make it look like you're running on real hardware in a VM.
Fine.
Ben Gaulis has a rather enlightening thread about this on Twitter. He goes on to explain that while Linux gamers were a very vocal part of their pre-launch community, they accounted for less than 0.1% of sales.
So,
yet they generate.
So this is what, Planetary Annihilation happened like a decade or so ago. So yeah, let's look that up actually. Planetary Annihilation. So this is a RTS game, very, very, very much similar to Total Annihilation, Cave Dog's Total Annihilation. So yeah, it was in 2014 that it released, so almost a decade ago. But at that point there wasn't Proton and the tools that we enjoy now. And yes, Steam on Linux was still very early, and optimization for a lot of games was very hard to do. But again, this stuff was like still quite early. I mean, I was like very wide-eyed and ponytailed by like the time this released, so I didn't get it on release because like fresh off the mission and things like that. Fresh off the mission, I think I had actually come home a little bit after that date. I don't remember no, it was a month before, just about. So yeah, but everything was still very early then for like native Linux gaming through Steam. So yeah, it makes sense why they were very vocal, but like still made up that very, very small minority.
Generated more than 20% of auto-reported crashes and support tickets. He also stated that near the end of his time there, nearly 100% of
Okay, so he noticed it was mostly graphics related. This is probably partially graphics driver related. So yeah. And yeah, he says skip Linux for that reason. He's saying this in 2019. I think maybe overall, that 20% is accounting for it, but that's still like, what, 20% for that minority? So yeah, they are generating a whole ton of stuff that you're trying to support for that small group of people.
tickets were still Linux related, despite Linux receiving the majority of the engineering effort, meaning the company likely spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting a community that made them a few hundred in sales revenue. And this isn't the only version of this story. And every time problems like these happen, it's just more ammo for developers that would rather spend zero time working on.
Okay, so here's the problem. If you caught the tweet, is like all the different ways that people have their setup is Linux is so like Linux isn't just drop and go for a lot of people. It's like, yes, you tweak it and you play with it the way that you want to. And that creates an issue for developers sometimes because they're trying to build on a similar stack. But now with Steam's runtime, if you are willing to run it inside of Steam's runtime environment, which basically has like standard libraries that your games should run off of inside of Linux, then it should make that simpler because it should create a more similar environment to what Windows. And that's part of the thing, is Valve has made the effort to make it easier on developers and on people, on the players as well, the gamers.
Take It Takes Two, for example. This is a gold-rated Windows native Origin game that I got running effortlessly, though I did buy it through Steam and I did launch it through Steam. At least it
Yeah, see, there it is. Yeah, he got it through Steam, and yeah.
was effortless until I wanted to have two controllers running at the same time. Kind of a requirement for this particular game if I want to play it with the wife. That sent me on a quest to ProtonDB to see if anyone else had had the same problem. And no, not really. Everyone else's problems are basically random.
Yeah. You're talking about a large community that, like, they have their wife plays games with them, really?
So, guess we're not playing that game for now. One of my other favorite games, Supreme Commander Forged Alliance, was as simple to run as clicking install and enabling a couple of launch flags. Awesome! But if you want to play multiplayer, whoo boy! Here's the story. When gas-powered games went under, a small community arranged to preserve multiplayer support for the game by building their own launcher. It is an amazing
Windows native launcher, something like Game Ranger, guaranteed.
example of the way that the PC gaming community can come together to preserve experiences that would otherwise be completely lost due to corporate buttholery. Unfortunately,
Nice, smooth.
every guide I could find to get the Forged Alliance Forever launcher working on Linux was either hopelessly out of date or not applicable to my.
This is very common when you're searching for stuff on the internet, is when you're trying to solve your problem, you find a post that is 10 years old or something. And I found this like in the very early times too, is that I'd search around for my issue on Ubuntu and whatever, and the post would be like 5 years old. And now I'm running into posts whenever I have problems and I'm trying to figure out what went wrong and things sometimes, and I'm searching the internet and the post is 15 years old. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I swear some of these posts are like posts that I came across 10 years ago. So yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
My particular distro. I don't blame the devs. Really, nothing but love for you guys. But Linux gamers, and more broadly, the Linux community, needs to understand that until the burden of supporting Linux is reduced significantly, this is always going to be a problem.
We actually live streamed trying to work through the Forged Alliance issues on Floatplane. Subscribe, by the way. There were more than a few comments in the chat criticizing us for choosing to play that particular game because it's old, it's just some crappy Java game, it's obscure, or because it's not fair to Linux, or whatever.
Okay, so a lot of older games run a lot better for their single play experience on Linux. Someone saying like you're playing an old game is, I'm sorry, I like to play old games, and when my Total Annihilation runs just fine in Linux on Wine, I'm happy. It's perfectly fine with me. I don't care. I didn't play the game because you wanted to watch it or play it. I played it because I wanted to play it. And yeah, some things require some extra tweaking and things like that. I'm not exactly going to have a good Total Annihilation experience trying to run Game Ranger all the time be on Linux because there isn't exactly an equivalent like that, or some other similar issue like that. And now a lot of things are supported through Steam multiplayer as well, so you don't need Steam multiplayer to play Battlefront 2, but you could use Game Ranger still, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's more an issue of these people. Yeah, some people in the Linux community are very opinionated, and they let you know that they hate your choice, and they're going to be very vocal about it, which I think is part of the issue with like the fragmentation and the things like that that developers may be shy about, that they're talking about, is that they're very opinionated. It has to work a certain way, and so you're trying to support a very, very picky group of people, and those very, very picky group of people is very, very vocal about it. And so there are a lot of times when I'm playing a game and it crashes, and I don't send a support ticket in or whatever, because it's like sometimes it's just an issue with my driver's setup at the time, or maybe it's just I have to reinstall a thing. Like when I was trying to play games with SC controller after I'd switched laptops, it wouldn't even run. Like the Steam controller daemon, nothing. The front end through SC controller wouldn't run. I uninstalled it and reinstalled it, and lo and behold, it worked just fine. Some things may be like that it's like, okay, I had an upgrade here, and maybe I just uninstall and reinstall it and it'll work fine. And these people are very picky, and that's what sometimes you have to do your own thing. And some of these people, yes, are very entitled. You supported Linux, so now support me now. Go. Even though you don't know what the heck you're doing.
Whatever.
But the bottom line is that none of that matters. What matters is that we like it, and we wanted to play it, but
my point exactly.
Instead of doing that, we played Terminal Command Simulator.
That's my favorite game, though. Go install Gen 2 now.
And honestly, I've gone through enough of that over the last month that it has sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of using my computer. Like, I have a pretty busy life, and when I manage to salvage an hour to relax and play video games, that is what I want to do. And it's really opened my eyes to why so many people choose to play on console instead of on PC. Like, this has got to be how a not super computer savvy user feels about updating a driver or fixing a firewall setting every time they just want to play a bloody game.
Brainlets, the lot of you. I just want to play my game. Why do I have to sit here and wait for Windows to update? The beauty is, if you know what games work on your system, then yeah, sometimes you do want to play a specific game, and yes, in order to get it to work, it just won't work. If I really feel like playing a certain kind of game, sometimes my game crashes and I'll go to something else that's similar. And I know it's sad, but I mean, not everything's going to work at the moment that I want it to work, and even on Windows, it's going to be the same way somewhat.
To be clear, I would never say that just because some old game doesn't run, it means that Linux sucks. In fact, I've permanently switched my laptop over to Linux because there are a lot of things it just does really well, even for someone more on the noob side of things like me. What it does mean is that gaming on Linux can kind of suck.
It's not that I don't enjoy tinkering with PCs as a hobby. I mean, man, the rush when Anno 1800 launched after spending a bunch of time fighting with it, it was phenomenal. I felt like...
Yeah, that once you get it running and you get it running perfectly, you're sitting there like running through like the different versions of Proton. Like I had this issue with Skyrim Special Edition where like it would run. I could hear like certain sound effects, but there was no music, no voice lines or anything. I went through like 3 different versions of Proton, including the experimental, before I'm like, okay, Glorious Eggroll. I mean, I've got it installed on my system just in case, and lo and behold, it worked just fine. And like I can get the sound lines and everything. It just has some crashy spots when I try and do certain glitches is the thing. So the bugs make Proton crash in Skyrim, but normal gameplay seems to be okay. Okay, so this bunch of videos I decided to turn into multiple parts because they're like all 15-minute chunks, so the upload schedule may be a little bit different, but you know, hopefully it's good and like it doesn't like put a full big thing into your face. So yeah, you know where the links are, and look out for the next part, and I will see you guys later.